Welcome to Focus on Why, the podcast where reflection sparks action. I'm Amy Rowlinson, and together we'll explore compelling stories, profound insights, and transformative experiences from inspiring guests worldwide. Feeling lost or unfulfilled? Searching for clarity, purpose, or meaning in your work and life? This podcast invites you on a journey of self-discovery to align your work with your values, shape your future with intention, and create a purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we begin, have you read my new book yet? Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life is co-authored with my late grandfather, George Fleming Kerr, and weaves in poignant journal entries detailing his experiences and insights of the 5 years he spent in captivity during World War II. Honest and heartfelt, this uplifting guide acts as your companion for life. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Check the show notes for links to get your copy today. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Holly Rowlinson. Holly, hello.
Good afternoon.
So lovely to have you on the show. Finally, after all these episodes, now you decide it's all good.
Yeah, after 5 years to the day, pretty much, that you came in with the idea and we were doing Joe Wicks in the morning. And then 5 years later, I'm finally a guest.
Yeah, and how funny was that actually Joe Wicks was part of that reason as well. He was there.
Yeah, he just keeps popping up in our lives.
He does indeed. So, but this isn't about Joe. This is all about you, Holly. So tell me, what is it that you're focusing on right now?
Well, right now, as of this moment, I'm working on my final essay and dissertation, which is due in the next 3 weeks, and then I will be finished with university and my degree, and I can start playing a lot more cricket.
Awesome. And it's been a long journey recently in terms of where you've been applying your focus. Yes, you've been applying to your studies and you're in your final year of university, but there's been something else, hasn't there?
That small, insignificant detail of my life. Yes, I have been running. Running with probably the most personal cause I will ever run for. And yeah, for those that don't know, which will be surprising to be honest, I attempted the Brighton Marathon last year and it did not go very well. I got to 27 kilometres and collapsed from heat stroke, which I didn't realise I had at the time. Literally all I remember is waking up on the side of the road with all these very lovely paramedics peering over me. And that was the end of that marathon. I didn't complete it. I was ambulanced off by St John Ambulance. And I'm sure we'll get into the details, but for the context, long story short, didn't finish, wanted to do it again. So St John Ambulance allowed me to run the London Marathon this year for them, and we've raised over £2,000 for them. And on Sunday, the 27th of April, 2025, I completed the London Marathon.
Well, that was a very short podcast. Thank you very much. In terms of, yes, that day, going back to Brighton, April 2024, John, Eddie, and I were waiting for you, not much further up from where you actually collapsed, and checking you on the tracker, keeping an eye out for you. We'd watch your friends, we'd watch Arthur, your boyfriend, go past us, all struggling, to be honest. The heat was intense and we knew it was going to be a hot day, but we didn't really realise what the toll was going to be on you and your body. And so when we were expecting you to arrive, instead, we got a phone call and it was to say that you had collapsed. So we had to make our way to you and to the medical tent and find you. It wasn't a quick recovery. You were pretty ill.
Oh yeah, I was out for, there was not much of me for a few days, and I was still living in the Netherlands at the time. So I had to delay my flight returning back to Amsterdam and things like that. And, it took, I remember I was volunteering at my local park run in Amsterdam, and I was tail walking, or in the Netherlands they call it sluitloping, which is funny. And that was so a Saturday following, so 6 days afterwards, and I was on my feet, moving around, not feeling 100%, but sort of better. I did the park walk, just an hour of walking. I was out for the count for the rest of the day. I just stayed in bed. It was a massive depletion on myself physically and mentally, for sure. It was a big hit, definitely.
And in between that, the delayed return to Amsterdam was, can I come back and spend a couple of days at home in the family home? So you were staying with Arthur, your boyfriend, and then you came back here and had the opportunity. In fact, both of you came back because you both were exhausted, having both run it. And he was in recovery, you were in recovery, both physically and mentally. And we had a conversation because you were so disappointed having not finished. Well, hadn't even been on your radar that was an option for that day.
Yeah, definitely. I just remember before the event as well, because it was my first marathon and I'd gotten into running a year before then. So, I was pretty confident that it was going to go well, and my training block had been impeccable. I'd done it to the T. I don't know the total distance that I ran in those 16 weeks of training, but I ran a lot. And so, yeah, exactly. Before the event happened, I had all these, thoughts in your mind where you go, oh, this time next week I've done it, and you envisage yourself crossing the line. And I said goodbye to my flatmates in Amsterdam, and I said, this time next week, we can go out and we can celebrate. And it just completely crumbled, and it was nothing. I'd been having this massive expectation of what was going to happen, and it didn't even come close. It wasn't even on my radar, as you said. This was completely out of the blue, and we had that conversation whilst I was at home. And when I tell people now about it, still I use your phrasing about how I sort of aggrieved the loss of what I'd been picturing and working so hard towards, that it just poof went away. And a couple of days later, it then started to hit that, oh, this has actually happened, or not happened. And trying to process that was hard. It was really hard.
And I remember I was in the final throes of editing my book, getting that final draft across to my publisher. And you came in, and I knew that I had just had to park what I was doing. And we spent, a couple of hours just totally unpicking everything that you were feeling, everything that had happened. And I helped you to understand that all emotions are useful, and that the disappointment that you were feeling was an incredibly useful emotion to understand. And as you said, grieve for what hadn't happened. And I also explained what you can and what you can't control difference, and that there are actually quite a few things in life that you can control, but actually there are so many more things that you can't. And the weather, your body, sometimes is just not possible. You just absolutely have no control over that, and the impact of that was going to have. So I remember describing to you what I'd witnessed on that day, and it actually made it into the book, this whole story. So if you've read the chapter on control, you will know the context of why we're talking now. But Holly, tell me from your perspective how you unraveled that moment to move from disappointment to something else.
Yeah, so obviously it's one of those things that I will say we worked on it, but I will also say that it's, again, one of those moments where with time comes processing, and sitting with the fact that I was sad about it, sitting with the disappointment and the anger as well. I remember I got very angry as well, that so frustrated, because as soon as I started to feel better, I remember on the day of Brighton, I was so unwell. I didn't, I couldn't consume any food or water. I literally just wanted to shrivel up and I think I did shrivel up on the sofa and just sort of existed barely. But when I started to feel better, that's when it hit, and that's when the moments were, oh well, you feel all right now, so you can't have been that bad. And it's actually, I had to remind myself, it's one of those things when you're unwell, you can't imagine how it feels to be well, and then when you're better again, it's really tricky to imagine what it felt like to be unwell again. And so actually just reminding myself of this really happened, and this was really big. You know, heat stroke is a serious matter. And fast forward to now, I'm doing lots of work with St John Ambulance about raising awareness for heat stroke and heat exhaustion. It's a properly dangerous thing. So sort of, again, giving myself that break and allowing myself to feel the disappointment, but also remind myself that this was a quite medically serious thing that's happened. That definitely helped process and let it go through.
And in that time that we sat down and we had the conversation and you had this realization, actually, yeah, it was hugely disappointing and frustrating, and you were angry. And yet then when I shared what I'd felt that day of how much love had been around you, how even after you had been picked up by the St John Ambulance, you had many people from the crowd who were protecting you from the sun, who were shielding you, giving you privacy because they had to cut your clothes off to get the ice packs in and get you really cooled down. And then after the couple of hours in the medical tent, when we were heading home, you could only walk a little bit before you had to sit down again. And I remember sitting on a bench and somebody coming past saying, "Hey, how you doing? What can I do to help?" You know, they just knew that still you needed something. And it was just so heartwarming to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes me so emotional even to think about it again. And it was just, you know, I write about it, you talk about it. You can't quite articulate that feeling of people helping other people. And, you know, I have it in my mind, you know, as we're speaking now of when I was lying on the floor, and I remember all their faces. I don't know any of their names, but, you know, even the paramedics who actually introduced themselves to me, I remember saying to one of them, he introduced himself, and I said, "I'm literally not going to remember your name. I'm so sorry." Because I wasn't in that state. I couldn't remember your phone number, something I've had memorized since I was 7. It was quite alarming, you know, the state that you're in. But what I do remember was just the completely automatic, you know, people just run into action. For them, it was not, they did not think twice about standing for 45 minutes with their jackets in the air to shield someone from the sun. And I remember I tried to say thank you, and they literally just, "Don't worry, we're fine, we're all fine." Everyone when you hold something up for a while, your arms are sore, are so sore. And obviously, you know, they didn't think twice. They literally didn't think twice. And the paramedics and all of the volunteers were just, as we say, for them, this was not a task. This was nature. And that was another thing that really got me through working through it, and actually remembering that as well is so important. And as you say, there's so much love, and marathons, regardless of the result, are such a testament to just the quality of humans, and in fact how fantastically amazing people can be.
It was so beautiful to be witness to, and to, yes, once I knew you were okay, obviously, you know, at the time we were very concerned for what was going on, and seeing you come out the back of the ambulance, you did not look like Holly, you know, it was
a shell, literal shell.
Yeah.
A skeleton.
So we were talking on that day, and it was in that moment that you decided, okay, I can transform disappointment into something else, and you took action as a result of that shift in reflection through to action. Share what that was.
I mean, yeah, we were talking and the question was very simple. It was, okay, what's next? And you didn't say anything. There was literally, it was just that. And it just came out my mouth. Well, I'm doing another one, obviously. And it's going to be for St. John. And it's going to be London. Because in my head, that was that came out as sort of guttural, instinctive. I didn't have control over that. That came out from somewhere else. And that was the response.
That's amazing. So that instinctive response to give back, having received such care and compassion and love from St. John, you knew where, you knew how, you knew what, you knew when, and you signed up.
Yeah, I signed up before the 2024 London Marathon. So Brighton was on the 7th of April, and I think London was on the 21st. And they hadn't even opened any ballot or any applications, and I emailed St. John directly, and they emailed back saying, "You're actually too early right now. Wait 2 weeks and we'll open the applications." And I then watched every single piece of coverage for the 2024 London Marathon. I was in Amsterdam at the time. I was watching it. We were on a bus to a flower festival or something, and I was with my friends, and they were getting really annoyed because I wasn't paying attention. I was just so engrossed with watching what I knew was going to be where I was going to be next year.
So that was the plan, a very clear plan. London 2025, fundraising for St. John Ambulance. You had a whole year to prepare. You knew what you needed to do in terms of fitness and training. I remember printing out with you a really great plan that you'd got from the Manchester Marathon. You had everything lined up. How was the plan, Holly?
Oh yeah, plans never work. Well, plans work, but sometimes life doesn't work with the plan. We over the summer, and we started fundraising quite early on, and the fundraising was super, super fun. We organised a charity cricket match at our Bromley Town Cricket Club which coincided with it being the first women's cricket match as well, which was fantastic. And we had a really great day, and that was a awesome way to kickstart the fundraising. And I then went back to Exeter University in September and had a couple of injuries. I was supposed to do a half marathon in October. It was a trail half marathon, so I decided not to do it. Arthur did it instead, just on his own, and I rested because we knew that the main goal was I need to be 100% all the time, fit and healthy for the big one. So then got back into the running around Christmas time, and that was fantastic. All guns blazing with the plan. And then February happened. February and March hit me hard. Hit me really, really hard. And that was with labyrinthitis. So I somehow caught or developed labyrinthitis. Still not entirely sure where it came from, but it did, and it hit me hard. And I was properly out, like bedbound, couldn't move for about 2 weeks. And apart from hobbling or being driven to the doctors, that was my life. My life was completely still, or else overwhelming nausea. I mean, I describe it as being constantly travel sick, and the balance, well, the lack of balance was something I'd never experienced before and never want to experience ever again. Eventually, I started to get better, and the balance still hasn't fully come back, but it was definitely, it took 6 weeks out of the training. It really, really put a wrench in the works, and that wasn't fun. That was mentally hard. That was physically hard, because they say you don't lose that much fitness over that much time, but I wasn't just not running, I was ill. And my body was trying to focus on getting better. And when I eventually returned to running, I had to take it super easy. And I remember I did I did a park run, but with an extra 5K with one of my housemates, and I felt fine. I was sort of really excited. This was about 5 weeks after I'd been ill, and I was like, hey, we're getting back on track. And then not even Sunday, but Monday, I started to feel really awful and really fatigued. And it wasn't a setback, but it was definitely a small step back. And it reminded me that this is going to have to drastically change. I cannot just fall back into the training that I wanted to. I don't have the fitness or the strength, and my body has been completely rattled by this. And so, yeah, we had to really change the strategy and change and adapt to how I was going to run this marathon this time. And luckily that coincided with coming home, getting some proper TLC, some R&R, and that really worked. And then we moved forward differently.
So what I'm hearing here, Holly, is again, you had a plan. It didn't go to plan, but you knew that there was no other alternative this time other than this marathon is going to happen. It's not going how I want it to go, but I'm still going to work towards a different way to get me there.
Oh yeah, 100%. I had a conversation with my dissertation supervisor before I came home for Easter holidays, and she was suggesting that I defer my dissertation. And in a similar way, she then, she wasn't keen on the fact that I had a marathon to run at the end of April. And that was not even an option for either of those things. There was no way I was going to put this off for another year. This was definitely happening. And then coming home, readjusting the plan, started running more properly again, but this time taking it super slowly, super easy. This was not going to be a strenuous. I was not going to put my body to the limit like I did at Brighton last year. At Brighton last year, I was going for a time that I thought I could achieve because of how I'd been training. And one day that might happen. I will go for that again. But as you say, I tell people, there was no universe in which I don't cross that line. And if I was going to have to crawl, walk across that line, it was going to happen. So in the beginning of April, when I got home, we had 4 weeks of training left, and I had 3 weeks of those to do some big runs. And on Mother's Day, I treated you to a 20k run. And then the week after, I managed to eke out a 30 kilometers, which felt really good. And I practiced, and I fueled differently. I gave myself way more sugar. I was making sure I was hydrated. Simple things that sound stupid to say now. I was wearing a hat this time. Brighton, I wasn't wearing a hat. I've been living in the Netherlands where it rains 97% of the time. I didn't need a hat for running. But for Brighton, I did. And I didn't think about that. So all these little things really made a difference to how I trained this time. And then 2 weeks to go, I managed to do a 25 kilometer, and those were the only long runs I did. And for anyone that's trained for a marathon, that's not very many. And the distance is not as far as I'd want to do. People often train up to 32 to 35 kilometers, their longest run. But you also do those about 3 times. And I did 1. It was definitely an unknown. I'd done the bare minimum that I needed to do in the circumstances, and I could do. And doing that 30 really gave me some confidence. But as soon as I stopped running and you start the taper and you start trying to rest up and making sure that your body is 100% energy for the day, nerves really set in, didn't they?
Oh my goodness. Unbelievably so. And rightly so, to be fair, because it meant so much to you. And we haven't really touched on it, but now's probably the best time to do that. The purpose piece. This is the why behind your desire to achieve this. Talk to us about what that meant.
Yeah. I will say that the interactions and support that I had from St. John Ambulance and meeting them, there were various training days we had and various training calls. And actually, understanding more about what they do, and not just how it helps people like me, but how it helps people in so many different ways, and all of the really important work they do. I mean, events like marathons and lots of other sporting events, but not just sporting events, you know, music festivals. And I'm organising helping organise the Exeter University cricket varsity match, and we've got St John Ambulance coming. You know, it's all those, they are everywhere behind the scenes, and you don't think you don't see them until you need them. They're the proper unsung heroes, and fundraising and spreading awareness about what they do was so important to me, and it just made my appreciation for them grow, you know, just exponentially. I couldn't even describe how important they are to people, and they're literally the unsung heroes, because you don't see them until you need them, and that is why they are so important. And raising the funds and getting everybody's support behind them was fantastic, and I just hope that it continues.
So when you believe in a cause and the desire is such, like it was for you, to have a redo, to get that finish, and it wasn't about a time, it wasn't about the medal, it was unfinished business, but then there was a pressure. And this is where you were so anxious prior to race day, and I call it race day, but it, you know, the marathon.
Yeah.
You were nervous because of the pressure of delivering for St John Ambulance, as well as completing something that you've had 2 years now in the making.
Yeah, definitely. It was really anxiety inducing, the fact that, okay, not only was I trying to do this for myself to prove that I could run the distance, quite literally, and there was also the added element of, right, well, I've raised all this money, all these people have donated, and if I don't do it, it's gonna suck. It's gonna be sad. And I don't want to use the word embarrassing, because it's not. If it was to happen again, great. Then the money that everyone donated went towards them picking me off the floor again if it happened, you know? So regardless, it's a win-win. But it is, you know, there is always going to be that element in your head that's going, well, you've got to do this now. There's more riding on you. Last year at Brighton, I was running for myself. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was so naive. Whereas this time, there were all these other elements of, right, got to do it. Got to do it for St John. Got to make sure that people understand the importance. And so yeah, it was I was so nervous. I was a wreck. I remember waking up the few days before, and I remember saying it felt like results day. I woke up with that pit in my stomach, and you know, that was the first thing I felt, and it wasn't fun. It was because it meant so much. It was so important, and so that's where the nerves came from. But yeah, it was, as you say, it was unfinished business, but it was also completely uncharted territory. I had never run further than 30 kilometers until Sunday. That was the scary part, because even though I knew it was going to be easier because changed the game plan, I ran miles slower than I was planning to, or did last year even. We made all the circumstances for Sunday pretty much impossible for me to not finish. But of course, you don't know. You just don't know. The weather forecast was getting hotter and hotter for Sunday. We were watching the news a couple of nights before Sunday, and they mentioned on the weather forecast, and let's see how the weather's going for Sunday for those marathon runners. And I almost cried. You know, it's so scary, because when you're looking at something that's saying, oh, it's going to be the hottest day of the year so far, and you're trying to run a marathon because you failed at the last one because it was too hot, that's terrifying. That is so terrifying. So yeah, I was nervous, to say the least.
And on the actual Sunday, I don't think that your dad, me, Eddie, and Arthur, our emotions were absolutely shot. We were so fearful because we weren't in control of your body. We didn't know what was going to happen. You did. You knew. You had that ability to measure and to notice what was going on. But every checkpoint that we were waiting at and your friends were waiting for you to come through, we'll be sending each other messages, come through. And we had the whole course covered between us just to make sure that you were there. But tell us what happened as you were going round that course. What was your experience? Yes, you finished. I mean, unbelievably
Spoiler
amazingly
alert.
so. Well, you said it right at the beginning, so here we go. But tell us what it was like as you were going through all of those kilometres from your lens, Holly.
It was, and this is probably not an exaggeration, the best day of my life. I cannot fully describe in words or in, I've made some videos on social media about it, documenting. You just can't, the moments that I will remember are the moments that I didn't document as well. Because you're not thinking about it at the time. And I met so many people on that day. I mean, from as soon as I got dropped off on Blackheath and I was really nervously trying to eat that banana. Oh my gosh, everything was making me feel sick that morning, but I just knew I needed the energy. And I just started chatting to this woman as we were walking towards our starting area, and I did that probably to any person I bumped into. I was not going to let them get away from me, because if I was talking to somebody, I was feeling less nervous. And I made friends at the start line. I found somebody in another St. John vest, and we bonded, and we'd actually recognise each other from the training calls. And then we'd talking to this other lady, because everyone is so nervous. And all you want in that moment is for someone to be able to relate to, and they will feel better, you will feel better. So we all took pictures at the start, and you meet these people that you will never see again, but they make an impact on your day. And everybody was so positive. We were all so nervous. We were all just standing at the start. I remember us standing at the start line going, you couldn't see the start when we were in our wave because there were so many people. We were like, where are we going? We were just walking, and, didn't seem like there was an end, and start even, I should say. And, but it was a common ground, and we were all in it together. And I loved the London Marathon's slogans, and it's even on my medal. It was we finished together, but obviously at the start it said we run together, and that was exactly what it was like. I met the most amazing people on that run that I have since had in contact with. Some of them I haven't, some of them I never will, but that doesn't matter. We were all part of it together. And we say it's a race, but for the elites, yeah, maybe a race, but for every single other person, that from where I was running, it was never a race. This was something that was a complete team effort. It was the biggest team I think I'll ever be a part of, all 56,000 of us. And I met these gorgeous souls. I just got adopted by these literally in the first kilometre. I don't even think we'd hit 1,000 metres yet. And these two lovely people, Hamad and Zara, I was just running next to them, and I think I may have laughed at what one of them said, or maybe just said hello, and that was it. We're locked in. And Hamad was sending me some videos from that he'd taken on his GoPro yesterday or the day before, and he actually documented us introducing ourselves, because we'd met, and then he was videoing, quite a lot of videoing, and you could, at the start of one of the videos, he's like, oh yeah, I'm Holly, nice to meet you, what's your name? Bear in mind we've both got our names on the front of our t-shirts, but you can't really see. But it was hilarious that we're doing a formal introduction, and then we go on to run for the next hour and a half together, and getting to know everybody's individual story was just fantastic. I mean, I say everybody, I'm probably a fraction of the people that were running, but you bond, and it's so comforting to have somebody in the same situation as you. And we've all come from very different places, but we're all there on that day running the same run. And it was so beautiful. I mean, to share that with people, I eventually lost those two and gained another person. I ran with Alicia until about 25k. We were doing so well together. I remember occasionally in the crowds you lose you lose people, and I would turn around and she'd give me a thumbs up, and I remember coming up and she said, as long as I can see you, we're all good. And then unfortunately it happens, you lose people, and then I was on my own, and that actually was the hardest bit. That was coming out of Canary Wharf. That was as soon as I hit 30 kilometers and I realized that she wasn't with me anymore, and thought, okay, I've got 12 kilometers to try and get through this last bit, and this being the longest I'll have ever run. Every step I was taking was long, and it was tough. And then I found Adam. Well, I obviously saw people as well. I saw Arthur on the way. That was the biggest oomph for me, seeing him at 33, bearing in mind he'd come up from Exeter on the day to see me. He wasn't even planning to see me running, but because I was running so slowly, he actually arrived in time to see me on the course. And every time I ran past you guys or my housemates or Arthur, I just burst into tears. But they weren't really tears because I was too dehydrated. Well, not dehydrated enough, but you can't really cry tears when you're running. So it was just this weird contortion of my face. And as well as that, I didn't stop smiling the entire day. So going round the entire course, just soaking it in. I mean, I can't even put into words anymore. It's the atmosphere on and alongside the course is unparalleled. I have never seen or experienced anything like it. And unless I do London Marathon again, I don't think I ever will. Everybody is so full of love and so full of support for you. I mean, I was asked what my favourite part was, and I think I said it was running past the pubs, because people were there on, midday on a Sunday, getting a little bit tipsy, but they were loving it, and you run past and you try and get them to get louder, and they start screaming your name. I mean, I'll literally never see them again, but it doesn't matter. They were all there for one purpose, and whether they were there to support people they knew or just they were there for the random people, that was what was important. And then, we'll go back to finishing the marathon with Adam at 38 kilometers. I was coming through the not foot tunnel. It was a normal tunnel, but for us, it was a foot tunnel on the day. And it was getting hard. The legs were tired. A lot of people were walking. People talk about the wall. The wall is so real. You hit that wall, you stop being able to hear the crowds as much. It becomes a proper mental battle. I was coming out of the tunnel, and I was a magnet for other St. John vests. Whenever I saw one on the course, I would go up to them and say, hey, let's go, how are we doing?
Because you hadn't stopped running the whole way.
No, I was going slowly, but I didn't stop. That was my, if I don't stop, we're getting through. And so I saw Adam and just, tapped him on the back as we were coming out, and he was walking, and I said, look, mate, let's go, let's do this. And then he saw that I was also from St. John, and as we were then coming out, he started running again, and there were some St. John volunteers at the opening, and we waved at them and saw them, and that gave us the boost. I then saw Dad and Eddie. I then saw Arthur a couple of meters after that, and then from that moment on, we were running that last 3-4k, and we were going to do it together. And I say we chatted, we did not really chat that much. You can't really get that many words out at the time, but I do remember saying to him, look, if you want to go, you go. I can't run much faster. And he said, I'm not going anywhere. This is the most I can do. And he then said, I think about 40 kilometers, just to remember all the lives that we're saving with this. And I said, Adam, you can't make me cry. You can't make me cry at this point. Let's cry when we're done. But it was so true. We dug deep for that moment, and we then passed the final St. John ambulance cheering point. And I actually, until the photos came out from it yesterday, I didn't remember that. I actually don't remember passing them that much, because we were so in the zone. We acknowledged them when we went past, but it's a long time. I was running for 4 hours and 50 minutes. It's a lot of time to remember things, and as much as I do remember, I did need a photo to jog that memory. And then we came round for the final stretch, and I saw you for the last time, but we were so locked in. We were we were going to get to that line. We could not stop, and we would not stop. And I remember us joking when both our watches had told us we'd already done the marathon distance, but we still had about 700 meters to go. And that was another moment where it's like, no, we are not stopping. Even though we've done it, we've not done it yet. And we turned around that corner on the Mall, and you see the finish line, and we couldn't contain it. We were so relieved to see it, and I say we gunned it. I think we still very much jogged the end, but at that point it feels like sprinting, and we crossed the line. I'd already started crying before then, and we had this massive hug, and I said to him, I will never forget this. This was the most special thing that could have happened for the end of this marathon. It made so much sense. It made absolutely so much sense that we both finished for, the marathon for St John Ambulance, and we didn't have that much time to chat. But I don't know why he was running for St John, and he doesn't know why I was running. But it didn't matter, because we were there, and we did it, and we took pictures with each other, after we got our medals, and then we sent each other to our families that are waiting for us. And I messaged him the day after, and he said something like, "Oh, I wouldn't, you pushed me over that line," and we both pushed each other over that line. And that's the spirit of the marathon. We will probably never meet again. You never know, but we shared something so special, and I shared something so special with Hamad, with Zara, with Alicia, and we're in contact now, and we've bonded for life, because it's something, you only do your first marathon once, and we all did our first marathon together, and that was what was amazing.
I'm actually quite emotional, Holly. Yeah, I mean, it was so emotional on the day, and it continues to be an emotional journey, partly because of the story that took you there, but also, as you said, every single person who runs that marathon has got a personal story, and many people run it with a cause that's close to their heart. I've done a walking marathon. I did the Shine Cancer Research Marathon back in 2011. And yes, seeing people's stories written on their backs as you're walking, and you understand what has got them there. Every single person at the London Marathon has an experience, has a reason, has a purpose, and it's so powerful. And you said you didn't get a chance, but you said you saw some signs.
I was just about to mention this. I must have seen at least 3 or 4 that I saw of, and especially when it was getting hard, there were lots of signs that people were holding up saying, "Remember your why." And I just remember going, "Oh, this is hilarious. This is such, like, mum's missing a PR stunt here." But it was so true. Every single person had their individual why. And God, I mean, I also was, when you run past people that forgot in memory of, and you actually get a bit of their story, yes, I had the vest on, but apart from my name, no one, unless you tell people, they don't know. But people that had their stories quite literally written on their bodies, that was next level. I almost had to not look, because it would make me start crying, and I was like, I can't lose tears until afterwards. I'm losing salt. I remember people get teary on the start line, and I remember making the joke, but very, very true point of the fact that we can't be losing tears. We need the salt. We need to retain everything we can. And so that was why after crossing that line, I just broke down. I mean, I did break down every time I saw people that I knew supporting, or people that I didn't know. It was so warming. I think I remember messaging somebody afterwards. They said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel warmed to the soul." Like I literally will never experience positivity and love in that capacity ever again, unless I do another one. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't. People coming together for people, or not even other people. I ran past a couple rhinos. That was intense too. Yeah, it's like nothing else.
I'll ask the question I asked a year ago. What's next?
I can't say it, but I want to do another one. It's crazy, but I want to do another one. You've got the bug. And if you'd asked me on Saturday before, I probably would have said, no, I'm one and done. I'm going to be done. If I do it, I'll be done. But now I've done it, because that was the biggest anxiety. That was why we took it so easy, and I didn't push myself because I just wanted to do it. As you said earlier, this was never about the time and all about the finish. Whereas now I've proven to myself and others that I can do it. So now I want to go again. And whether I do that for St. John again, I mean, I love them so much. They will have such a special place in my heart. And it would seem, I don't know, I wouldn't feel right to not run for them. So who knows? We'll see. But maybe I'll go and do Amsterdam Marathon first.
Amazing. And your brother, he seems to have caught the bug. Thank you for that. My emotions, John's emotions, your parents, we are absolutely beside ourselves now. We've got 2 people running.
I know. I told him before. I called it. I said, you're going to get the bug. I guarantee it was either him or one of my housemates was going to get the marathon bug, and lo and behold, he's in the ballot for next year, as am I, but no one gets in the ballot these days.
Yeah, it was a huge number of people that entered the ballot already for 2026, and it was a record-breaking year of how many finishers completed the London Marathon in 2025, so there's no surprise to me that that's happened. Holly, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I can't describe just how proud we all are of you, and I know you are of yourself because of what you've achieved. In final words, what is it that you could say to close out today's episode, please?
Can't think of anything that doesn't sound super cringy, but I mean, honestly, never give up. Really just don't give up. If something doesn't go your way, adapt. And as we always say, control the controllables. You know, it's so real. It really works. And if you have a drive and have something that means enough to you, that's enough. You will. If you have the willpower, you will. And that was what got me over the line on Sunday.
This episode's over, but let's keep the conversation going. How has this episode impacted you? Share your insights, takeaways, and reflections with actions on social media, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback creates powerful ripple effects, helping others to discover its value. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for links on how to work with me, where to buy my new book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and where to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Not me, not Hermione, you.